Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace. More on them a little bit later. There are few scenes more iconic in the Sonic franchise than the death of Shadow the Hedgehog, wrapping up his story of revenge turned to redemption quite nicely. But Sega had designed themselves the coolest rival yet for Sonic, and they weren't about to leave that money on the table. So, one game later, not only was Shadow back, but a whole lot of shadows, because even Eggman saw the marketing potential of the Black Hedgehog. This, as we would later learn, was yet another robot double of a Sonic character. But this was no metal or mecha. This is the Shadow android? The intrigue of this bot isn't found in its design, but rather the mystery surrounding them, inspiring a long-standing theory still very popular among Shadow fans today. Did Shadow actually survive the end of Sonic Adventure 2, or have we been following a faker? We haven't been. Shadow's the genuine article. This has been clarified many times. I know a lot of you wanted him to stay dead, and usually those are the biggest fans of Shadow. Sonic fans are a very complex bunch of people, but that was a genuine mystery for a good long while. And at the time, I was curious to learn how Shadow came back when Sonic Heroes dropped. But by the time we wrapped that game up, we were left with only more questions thanks to these androids, teasing us with a torso and then a whole hallway filled with them in these goo jars. They served as the narrative tease for Shadow's title game, where they'd be properly introduced as Shadow makes his way through the Iron Jungle and comes face to face with his face. Oh my god, would you look at that? They both showed up to the party with the same inhibitor rings and air shoes. Oh, how embarrassing. Shadow looks on in horror as he sees rows and rows of himself awaiting the order of their creator, Dr. Eggman, leading Shadow to ask,
"Am I an android too?"
Obviously, the Shadow we're playing is the genuine article. Look how many more polygons he has compared to all these posers. The game tucks away the genuine answer to the android question way at the end after you've completed every single other ending, finally unlocking the Super Shadow fight. And not only that, you gotta stick around for at least 8 minutes to get the Eggman voice clip where he confirms that he did indeed rescue Shadow after SA2. Shadow didn't die, he just lost his memory for a while. So, the mystery is solved.
Can you hear me? This might be the last chance I have to speak to you, so what I said about having created you, it was all a lie. Everyone thought you died during that horrible incident, but I rescued you with one of my robots. You lost your memory, that's all. You really are the ultimate life form my grandfather created.
And even before Shadow's own game, Sonic Heroes dropped plenty of clues to indicate that the Shadow we were playing was the real deal. When you start Team Dark's campaign, Rouge finds Shadow in a pod, not dissimilar to the ones we see at the end of the game, but his is isolated from everyone else's. It's the only one guarded by Omega. And as Omega himself says at the end of the game, the fact that all of these androids exist means that the original is out there somewhere, subtly showing us that he believes that the hedgehog they've been palling around with this entire time is more than likely the real thing. And Neo Metal Sonic, the antagonist for Sonic Heroes, copies the DNA of every other player character, including Shadow. It's likely he would be able to do that with an android. But on that note, it is interesting just how close the androids are to copying the actual Shadow. It's a shame that the conversation around the androids usually ends when the mystery is solved, because these are some of the most impressive robots ever produced by Eggman. These androids are meant to replicate Shadow, not unlike Mecha Knuckles from Sonic Advance, but unlike that robot, which is just wearing a disguise, the Shadow android is a much closer copy to the original. And that's no small feat considering that Shadow is the ultimate life form, a super hog capable of all kinds of impressive feats and capable of handling chaos energy. And actually, let's not only go back to Mecha Knuckles, but back through the entire line of mecha copies in general. The original Mecha Sonic is just a clunky copy of Sonic, sure, but Mark II steps it up, able to harness Emerald energy. Following that, Eggman sends another robot copy to the Master Emerald in the form of Mecha Knuckles, who looks a lot more like the original character it's trying to to copy. And all of that culminates in the Shadow android, a near-perfect copy of Shadow himself. Eggman had plenty of experience making robot clones up to this point, and he now had an unconscious Shadow that he had unfiltered access to study as much as he wanted. Eggman managed to create a robot double so perfect that it tricked Shadow himself and made him question his own identity. And then he mass-produced them. Now, while this does lead us to one of the silliest endings I've ever seen in any of these games, where Shadow declares himself the ultimate android, it is still pretty impressive that Eggman finally managed to produce a robot clone that's almost identical to the original. But let's be fair here as well. In the main game, the androids are very easy to take out. Unlike the metals and mechas of prior games, they appear as just common enemies for Shadow to wipe out, and really it doesn't take much effort. Not sure how canon you want to consider game mechanics, but I don't think anyone's questioning the power of Metal Sonic versus a Caterkiller. How these characters are presented does still need to be taken into account, and going by this, it's fair to say the androids probably aren't all that tough. But if we're going to consider how they're presented in actual gameplay, we do also need to consider the multiplayer mode of Shadow the Hedgehog. Here we get to see the androids take on some physical variations with different color stripes, black scleras, and some even have a metallic sheen, and others have guns grafted right onto their arms. More interestingly, these robots can harness chaos energy like the actual Shadow, and seem to have some form of sentience, as they'll talk trash to each other, claiming the other to be a fake. Got a real Rick and Morty plot forming in this multiplayer mode. Again though, this is multiplayer, so it does make sense to allow the player to have all the abilities of the core game, and throwing in some lines here and there to give little personality also makes sense. Gotta have some variety since we really are only allowed to play one single character. And really, a lot of what I'm saying today can also be applied to the Sonic bots of the multiplayer mode in Sonic Colors, which if you think about it is technically impressive, but nobody really cares. Will say though, I kind of forgot how often Sonic games use robot doubles in their multiplayer modes. What an odd legacy. I'm into it. Unlike the Sonic Colors robots, Shadow doesn't have a lot of robot doubles. I mean, okay, technically, yes, he does. These are mass-produced androids, but he doesn't have a metal Shadow or a mecha Shadow like Sonic does. This is the closest we get for the Dark Hedgehog. And again, they're more here to add to the mystery of Shadow's identity than to stand out on their own. Once the question was answered, they were very quickly discarded. But they have made a little resurgence in recent years, partially thanks to Sonic Speed Simulator, which is just filled to the brim with obscure references to the series, including the Shadow androids, and of course, the IDW comic series, which redefined the role of these robots. Here, they don't carry any trace of Shadow's personality, or really much in the way of his abilities. They act a lot more like zombots, mindless, shuffling creatures that are far deadlier in hordes than they are alone, as proven when they take out the original Diamond Cutters, making them an important key point in Whisper's tragic backstory. And we did get to see them once again in the Urban Warfare arc, and it was cool seeing all the heroes take on all these robots. Having them act like creepy, silent zombies does, weirdly enough, give them a little more identity when compared to the other robot copies, but obviously there's no mistaking the real Shadow compared to these guys when we look at them in the comic. If I had to guess, I'd say that these particular androids are a little undercooked. That would explain why some of them look a little more like robots versus the ones that look almost exactly like Shadow. They're just at different stages of completion. I don't know if that's ever been explained or if that's just my own headcanon. Because again, going through the main Shadow game, these androids stay mute and they are really easy to destroy. That tracks with what we see in IDW. Regardless, I did like seeing them again, and I was into the interesting, horrifying way they were utilized. But all that said, there's always been something interesting I found about these androids. I think they help answer a question I've always wondered. Why don't we have a metal Shadow? Let's go back to that clip where Eggman explains that Shadow is the real deal, because it's not only exposing that particular fact, it's also showing us how Eggman views Shadow. As the Doctor says himself, Shadow is the ultimate life form created by his grandfather. Shadow has caused Eggman a lot of grief. They are enemies, but deep down, it's pretty clear that Shadow still represents the living legacy of Gerald Robotnik and, of course, Maria as well. Yes, Eggman ended up saving the world by going against Gerald's plans at the end of SA2, but Shadow is the last connection he has to his family. Yes, Eggy is still out to conquer the world, and yes, he still kept Shadow in a goop tube while he replicated him in android form, but I feel like in his own twisted way, this is Eggman trying to honor and learn from his grandfather, while maybe also trying to surpass him while respecting his ultimate design. And shout out to Semi-Frequent Sonic Facts because I saw them respond to one of my threads on Twitter with a similar mindset here. I do think that Eggman creating a metal Shadow would be seen as disrespecting his grandfather's design. So instead he made near perfect replicas and then mass produced them. It doesn't make the most sense, but this is a mad doctor who has a very complicated relationship with his family we're talking about here. He's not exactly known for his emotional maturity, and he can express his feelings in very weird ways. So yeah, there you go. That is the Shadow android, a robot clone that's a little more interesting than it might first appear. There's more than meets the eye, because it's a robot in disguise. I don't know how to change forms on Transformers toys, they make me feel stupid. Of course, even if we can justify the lack of a metal Shadow in the mainline canon, it hasn't stopped me from wanting one. So stick around because soon we're going to make a video talking about exactly that. What if there was a metal Shadow? If you're trying to build an online business or you want to set up a nice little space to show off your creative skills with a portfolio, or even if you wanted to just put together a creative gift, there are so many ways to take advantage of a web page, and Squarespace makes it as easy as possible. They have a huge variety of templates, fonts, color palettes, everything you need to show off your unique style without it being overwhelming. And it doesn't just stop at looks. You can take advantage of their behind-the-scenes analytics to see where your customers or viewers are coming from. They can pull all your social media accounts into one hub and help send out any messages or advertisements or whatever you have from one convenient spot and give you any notification from any of those websites there as well. Everything you need to build a proper marketing strategy to help you grow as a creator or as a business or really whatever you want. It's never been this easy to mark your place in the digital frontier. Go take a look for yourself. I've only mentioned a handful of features they offer. You can get a free trial going over at squarespace.com, and if you want to take the plunge, head over to squarespace.com/gameapologist and get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. Before we go, I have to thank the amazing people who help support the channel. That includes Kyle Winter, Cirrus the Skeptic, Joseph Duncan, Sonic 2 Blue, Josh Strider, Casey Monroe, Trey Nobles, Hatsworth, Tiny Jericho, Ginger Bob, Jack of All Spades, Tristan Trapp, Meekers, Dun Dun Quote, Resident Fanboy, Miles the Prower, Singer J199, Sam Webster, Fish Flop, Lucas Lipkirth, Bad Pal, Jonathan Dobbs, Chad. SP can't come to the phone right now, please leave a message after the beep beep. Cecil the Glade, The Dark Neon, Stefan Platonica, 3 Monic, Graham J. Hall, Lenny X, Wayne is Boss, Lederick, Dava Toi, Na Kava, Kaylee Ann Williams, Jimmy Duke STR, The Lumberjack, Trash Baffment, Enerjack 5, Grayson Conager, Spades the Nocturne, Ken K of Warheads, Ven 101, Paxton Bisbee, Sendarin 7, Small Winter Bunbee in a Scarf, Dreaming of Spring, Twilord, I bought the entire helium supply, have fun blowing up balloons now, Paisley, Eric Delgado, Crimson Rose, Nyx the Kobold, Municent, Roxas the Cat, Godzilla, Makuta of Salt, Gleam the Anomaly, Alexander Watson, Neil Gompa, Conan Kudo, Tenric Terror, the Lex, the most powerful ship in the 2 universes, Native Nerd 27, Kaido Prower, Spearmint, Speedy Cervici of the Samurai Pizza Cats, Omega Man 21, Penn Adelaide, Jamie Torres Jr., Daza S, the world's most unironic 8.5 Tails Tan, one more Sonic Robot, slightly less evil clone SP, MT Mecha, Yasai, Gob, Charles the Green Dragon, Botan, here to remind everyone that manatees are awesome, the RSI, Radiant Starlight, and OhGreatGames.com. Once again, thank you guys so much for your support, and I'll catch you next time. Toot toot, Sonic Warriors!